Okay, so you want to own a trucking company, buy a truck, hire some drivers, move freight from point A to point B, and watch the cash roll in every time America needs something moved from one place to another. And America always needs something moved. Groceries, medicine, steel, lumber, electronics, everything sitting on every shelf in every store in this country got there on the back of a truck. There is no substitute. There is no workaround. Trucking is the backbone of the American economy. Here's the part nobody puts on the brochure. In 2023, nearly 88,000 trucking companies shut down their operations in a single year. Not 88, not 880, 88,000. The following year, a 10% decline in the total number of motor carriers. In the first half of 2024 alone, nearly 10,000 carriers closed their doors. And through all of it, trucks kept rolling. Freight kept moving. Shelves stayed stocked. The industry didn't stop. The people who owned the companies just ran out of money while it was still running. By the end of this video, you'll understand why trucking generates $906 billion in annual revenue and still managed to wipe out more companies in 2 years than most industries produce in a decade. How the difference between profit and ruin is measured not in millions or thousands, but in cents, fractions of a single cent per mile. Why the largest trucking bankruptcy in American history happened to a company that was 99 years old and should have known every trap in the industry by heart. And why the business that moves 72% of everything America consumes is one of the thinnest margin, highest burnout, most brutally competitive businesses a person can walk into with a truck and a dream. Let's start with what it actually costs to get in the door. A new Class 8 semi-truck. The big rig, the 18-wheeler, the machine that hauls America, costs between $120,000 and $200,000. New, off the lot, with a warranty. Most people don't start there. Most new owner-operators buy used. A used truck in working condition runs $45,000 to $100,000 depending on age, mileage, and how honest the seller is about the maintenance history. You still need a trailer. A standard dry van trailer, the rectangular box you see behind every 18-wheeler on the interstate, costs $40,000 to $70,000 new. Refrigerated trailers run higher. Flatbeds depend on spec, and you need insurance before the truck moves an inch. Not regular insurance, commercial trucking insurance. For a new authority carrier, someone just starting out with their own operating license, annual premiums run $14,000 to $22,000 per truck. That's per year, before you've hauled a single load, because insurers know what they know about new carriers, and what they know is that new carriers crash, miss payments, and fold at dramatically higher rates than established ones. The premium reflects that knowledge. Then there are the licenses. Your US DOT number and MC number run $300 through the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Your international registration plan plates, required to cross state lines, run $1,500 to $4,000 per year. Your unified carrier registration. Your electronic logging device, now federally mandated to track your hours of service. Your international fuel tax agreement decal. Your operating authority bond. Then there's the 18-month clock. New carriers with fresh operating authority cannot access the full freight market immediately. Load boards restrict access. Brokers charge higher commission rates, 15 to 25% of load value instead of the 5 to 15% established carriers pay. The first year and a half of your trucking business, you are paying more for the same freight that a 10-year carrier sitting next to you at the truck stop picks up for less. Add it up. Down payment on a used truck, trailer, first year of insurance, all the permits, registrations, and bonds. 3 months of operating capital to cover fuel and expenses while you wait for invoice payments that take 30 to 90 days to arrive. A realistic entry into trucking as a single owner operator runs $25,000 to $50,000 in cash out of pocket before the first load pays. That sounds manageable. That is not the hard part. Here's what the money actually looks like once you're running. The American Transportation Research Institute measures the cost of operating a truck every year. In 2024, the average cost was $2.26 per mile. That number covers fuel, driver wages, truck payments, insurance, maintenance, tires, tolls, and administrative costs. Every mile your truck turns, $2.26 goes out. The spot market rate for a standard dry van load in 2025 and 2026 averages $1.80 to $2.40 per mile. Read those two numbers next to each other. At $2.40 per mile revenue and $2.26 per mile cost, your margin is 14 cents. At $2.20 per mile revenue and $2.26 per mile cost, you are losing 6 cents on every mile, with the truck moving, fuel burning, driver getting paid, everything working exactly as intended. The difference between those two scenarios is not how good you are at trucking. It is what a freight broker offered you on a Tuesday morning in a market where there are more trucks than loads. And 16.7% of all miles driven in 2024 were empty. Empty miles. The truck moves, the fuel burns, the hours count against your driver's legal limit, and zero freight revenue comes in. Nearly 1 out of every 6 miles this industry drove in 2024 generated nothing. The industry calls those miles deadhead. It is an accurate name. Here's what's eating the margin. Fuel alone runs 25 to 35% of gross revenue. It is your single largest variable cost, and you have almost no control over it. The national diesel price averaged $4.12 per gallon in 2024, with major regional variation. West Coast diesel runs 40 to 60 cents higher than Gulf Coast prices per gallon. A driver running from California to Texas on a loaded truck does not get to choose which diesel price applies to the miles he drives in California. When diesel prices spike because of a hurricane, a refinery outage, a geopolitical event on the other side of the world, your cost per mile climbs immediately. Your revenue per mile does not climb with it. You already accepted the load at the rate the broker offered. You already committed the miles. Then tires. An 18-wheeler runs 18 tires. Commercial truck tires cost $350 to $500 each at replacement. At 100,000 mile service life, you're spending $6,300 to $9,000 per tire rotation cycle just to keep rubber on the road. Then maintenance, engine, brakes, transmission, suspension, electrical. A well-maintained late-model truck averages 15 cents to 25 cents per mile in upkeep. At 130,000 miles per year, that's $19,500 to $32,500 before any unexpected breakdowns. And breakdowns happen. A failed injector, a blown turbo, a cracked air line discovered at a roadside DOT inspection. The truck goes down. Every day it sits in a shop is a day generating zero revenue, while fixed costs, truck payment, insurance premium, keep running. This is the business, not the open road, not the freedom. The constant grinding management of expenses measured in hundredths of a cent per mile against revenue set by a market you did not control and cannot predict. In 2020 and 2021, something unprecedented happened to trucking. The pandemic shut down the economy. Then it didn't. Then consumer spending shifted dramatically, suddenly, from services to goods. People couldn't travel, couldn't eat in restaurants, couldn't go to events, so they bought things. Furniture, electronics, home improvement equipment, everything shipped. Freight demand exploded. Spot rates went vertical. Owner-operators who had been grinding out thin margins for years suddenly found themselves making more money than they'd ever seen. The industry responded the way any industry responds to sudden extraordinary profit. It expanded. New truck orders hit record highs. New operating authorities were issued by the tens of thousands. Between 2020 and 2022, hundreds of thousands of new carriers entered the market, attracted by rates that looked like they'd changed the fundamental economics of the business. They hadn't. By 2022, consumers had what they needed. Retail inventory levels had been rebuilt. Spending shifted back towards services. Freight demand fell, but the capacity that entered the market during the boom did not leave. There were suddenly far more trucks than loads. Spot rates collapsed. The Great Freight Recession began. In 2023, nearly 88,000 trucking authorities were revoked. In 2024, the total number of motor carriers fell by 10%. In the first half of 2024 alone, close to 10,000 carriers closed their doors, and that number included carriers that were not new, carriers that had survived 2008, carriers that had survived 2016, carriers with decades of experience. established customer relationships, and paid-down equipment suddenly found themselves unable to cover operating costs at rates the market was offering. In November 2025, carrier bankruptcies reached the highest rate on record, surpassing every previous trucking downturn in history. Companies that had survived 3 recessions could not survive this one. The Great Freight Recession became the longest freight downturn in the history of the American trucking industry. On August 6, 2023, Yellow Corporation filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The company had been in business for 99 years, founded in 1924 as Yellow Cab Transit, one of the original Big Three of American less-than-truckload freight, a company that had moved the furniture, pallets, and industrial shipments of American commerce for nearly a century. It had 30,000 employees, 12,000 trucks, 35,000 trailers. It was the largest trucking bankruptcy in American history. Here's how a 99-year-old company disappears in 48 hours. Yellow had made a series of acquisitions in the early 2000s, buying Roadway for nearly $1 billion in 2004, absorbing USF in 2007, each one layering more debt onto a company whose margins were already measured in fractions. The 2008 recession hit while Yellow was carrying that debt. Then deregulation had already been eroding union cost advantages since 1984. Then COVID. Yellow received a $700 million pandemic relief loan from the U.S. government in 2020. It had only repaid $230 million of the principal by the time it collapsed. Through all of it, Yellow needed the Teamsters Union to approve a reorganization plan, the One Yellow Plan, that would have merged its various operating companies and restructured its cost base. The Teamsters, representing 22,000 of Yellow's workers, refused to negotiate for 9 months. When the Teamsters finally threatened a July 24th strike over missed pension and health benefit payments, a pension fund agreed to keep health benefits active for 1 more month. Yellow was given 30 days to find money it didn't have. It didn't find it. The company halted freight pickups. Drivers were notified. 30,000 people were out of work. The bankruptcy left a $5 billion hole in the U.S. economy. The freight Yellow had been hauling needed to go somewhere. Competitors absorbed it. Yellow's terminals, sold at auction, brought in $2 billion. The trucks were auctioned separately. The physical assets of a 99-year-old company were sold off in pieces. The company itself was gone. Yellow's CEO said it was with profound disappointment that the company was closing. The Teamsters said Yellow had received billions in worker concessions and hundreds of millions in government bailouts and still couldn't manage itself. Both of them were right, and neither of them were wrong, and it didn't matter. The company was done. What Yellow shows you is not simply that old companies can fail. What it shows you is that in trucking, size does not protect you. Scale does not protect you. 9 decades of operational knowledge does not protect you. When the margin goes negative and it stays there long enough, even a carrier that has been running trucks since Calvin Coolidge was president runs out of road. Here is the thing about trucking that makes it structurally different from almost every other industry. 91% of all trucking companies in the United States operate fewer than 6 trucks. 91%. 354,000 of all motor carriers are single truck operations. 1 truck, 1 driver, usually the owner. 1 set of fixed costs running every day whether or not the truck moves. 1 load board, 1 broker relationship, 1 fuel card, 1 margin thin enough that a bad quarter isn't a setback. It's a threat to the entire operation. These carriers have essentially no pricing power. A major retailer shipping 500 truckloads a month has the leverage to negotiate rates directly with large carriers, lock in contracted rates below the spot market, and demand capacity guarantees. A single owner-operator with 1 truck takes what the broker offers on DAT or truckstop.com on the morning the load is available or the truck sits empty. Then there is the driver shortage. The American Trucking Association's estimated a shortage of 80,000 truck drivers in 2024. Not enough people with CDLs willing to do the work at the rates the market can bear. The average truck driver is 46 years old. Only 6% of drivers are under 25. The pipeline is not being replenished at the rate the industry needs. For a carrier trying to scale beyond 1 truck, this creates a specific trap. You can find loads. You can buy a second truck. You cannot always find a qualified driver to run it, and a truck sitting in a lot depreciates, owes monthly payments, and generates 0 revenue while you wait. Driver turnover at large truckload carriers hit 87% in 2024, 87%. Nearly 9 out of every 10 drivers at a large carrier left and needed to be replaced in a single year. The cost of recruiting, onboarding, and training one truck driver runs $5,000 to $8,000. At 87% annual turnover, a carrier with 100 trucks could be spending $435,000 to $696,000 a year just keeping seats filled. And the moment you hire a driver, you own the liability that comes with them. A commercial truck accident involving property damage averages $91,000 in claims. An accident involving a fatality averages $3.6 million. Nuclear charge verdicts, cases where juries assign damages far beyond actual losses, have resulted in trucking companies paying $10 million, $50 million, even $100 million from a single collision. One accident, one driver, one bad moment on an interstate. The liability does not scale with your company size. A one-truck operation faces the same potential nuclear verdict exposure as a 1,000 truck fleet. The only difference is the 1,000 truck fleet has the cash reserves to survive it. There are two parts to this: a single owner operator, one used truck financed, one dry van trailer leased, $30 a day in permit and registration amortization, insurance running $1,500 a month, truck payment at $1,100. You're running 10,000 miles a month. The spot rate you're averaging is $2.10 per mile. Gross revenue, $21,000. Fuel at 6.5 miles per gallon. Diesel at $3.90. Maintenance reserve, $2,000. Tires, tolls, permits, $800. Total expenses, $11,400. Net before taxes and self-employment contributions, $9,600. $9,600 a month, $115,200 a year before a 25 to 30% tax hit on self-employment income. Before a breakdown that wipes the maintenance reserve and sends you to a shop for a week. That is a real number for a good month in a recovering market. In a bad month, spot rates at $1.85. A week of deadhead miles, a blown tire. That number can go negative. Not close to zero, negative. You spend more running the truck than the truck earned. That is not a hypothetical. That is what happened to tens of thousands of carriers during the freight recession. The truck kept rolling, the money stopped coming. And there is another, a mid-size fleet, 20 trucks, dedicated contract lanes with direct shipper relationships, rates negotiated at $2.35 per mile, not spot, fuel hedged with a fuel card that locks in below-market diesel pricing, a safety department, a dispatcher, a maintenance program that catches problems before they become breakdowns. At $2.35 per mile with 20 trucks running 10,000 miles a month each, gross revenue is $470,000 a month. Total operating costs at $2.10 per mile, $420,000. Margin, $50,000 a month before overhead. Then the overhead. Dispatcher salary, insurance on 20 power units, now $25,000 to $40,000 a month at scale. Safety program, compliance officer, accounting, net profit on a well-run 20-truck fleet in a recovering market, 3 to 6% on a $5.6 million annual revenue operation. That is the entire industry in one number. Same as gas stations, same as airlines, same as refineries. The infrastructure is massive. The revenue is enormous. The margin is thin enough that a single bad quarter with bad rates and bad weather and one nuclear verdict can erase 3 years of profit in a calendar year. Trucking moves 72.7% of all freight in the United States by weight. Everything in your refrigerator, the medicine in your cabinet, the phone in your hand, the building materials in every new home under construction, the auto parts in every factory assembly line, the Amazon box on your porch, all of it, 11.27 billion tons in 2024 alone, moved by truck. The industry generated $906 billion in gross freight revenue last year, and in that same year, 10% of all motor carriers ceased operations. Nearly 10,000 carriers closed in the first 6 months alone. The longest freight recession in American history continued into 2026 with no clean end in sight. In 1924, the year yellow freight was founded. The American highway system barely existed. The truck was a new invention. The idea that these machines would one day move the entire consumer economy was barely imaginable. Yellow ran trucks for 99 years, through the Great Depression, through World War II, through the interstate highway system being built around them, through deregulation, through 2008, through a pandemic that gave the company a $700 million lifeline, it still could not convert into survival. In the end, 30,000 people lost their jobs, and the company's terminals were auctioned off in pieces. The industry that cannot stop, because if it stops, grocery stores empty in 3 days, and gas stations run dry in 2, is the same industry that burns through companies like fuel. You're not in the business of trucks. You're in the business of the gap between what a broker will pay you per mile and what it costs you to drive it. And that gap opens and closes for reasons you will never fully control. Fuel, weather, freight volumes, shipper inventory levels, every new carrier entering the market on a good rate and driving the next rate down. Get the gap right consistently for years, and you've built something real. Let the gap close on you for one bad quarter with no reserves to cover it, and you become one of the 88,000. Next up, if you want to see what economics looks like owning an ancient empire, you would be surprised when you see the numbers covering that. That video is next.